There is nothing I can do about it unless you want me to infringe on their civil liberties.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do a book review without a lot of notes, so we'll see how this goes. I'll do it again if I'm not happy with it. But I want to do a very quick response to a book I've just finished. It's got a particular context because this is the first book of a new book club that I'm involved in. So I want to talk about the book club and I'll talk about the book. And I think it's quite an interesting, fascinating book. So anyway, I'll tell you about the book club. So I did do a little announcement thing in December about it, and I know some of the other people that are involved have done that. It was the brainchild of Scott from the Bookish Bryants. So Scott and Becky have got a brilliant channel that's worth checking out if you haven't checked them out. I'll link them below, the Bookish Bryants. And they had originally came up with the New World's November event, which if you got involved in that, that's cool. I got involved in that. I was a co-host for that. It was the first time I've co-hosted something, actually. I'm currently co-hosting the Historathon as well, so that's really nice. So that's the second thing I've co-hosted. But this was the first time I'd actually co-hosted an event. So I've got involved in events before, and I think I'd got involved in 3 previous Bookish Bryants events before. But New World's November was the first one I'd actually co-hosted. So obviously you want to be more heavily involved than just casually reading something, and I put some New World's November content on my channel. And anyway, we had a Voxer group for the people that were hosting it. There was like 10 of us or something, and it was a very lively, fantastic Voxer group, and I got to know those people, the other booktubers that are in there, really well, which is fantastic. It was really active. I mean, sometimes you'd get up the next morning and there was like 150 messages you had to listen to, but it was really awesome. And anyway, on this Voxer chat, we talked about starting a book club. So because it came from New World's November, and New World is such a nice way of referencing science fiction, it is a science fiction book club, so we called it the New World's SF Book Club. So you may have seen some videos about that, but that's what it was, the New World's SF Book Club. And we've put, all of us have put a book in the pool of books, and then once a month Scott and Becky draw a name out, a name of a book, and then, you know, that could be one of these booktubers that have chosen it, and that book is read for the month. And then we all talk about it, and we all announce it on the on Scott and Becky's channel. And then if you want to get involved and you want to read it and talk to us about it, then there's a Discord server about that, so you can get involved on Discord, but you can obviously comment on our channels as well. So anyway, that was the idea of the New World's SF Book Club, and it's an interesting thing to try and think about what you're going to put in as your vote for what book you'd like everyone to read. Because you can either, you know, you can go various ways. You can either pick a book you want to reread that you particularly like or you think is interesting. You might want to reread it because you didn't quite like it and you think you might like it more on a second read. Because I've got a few books like that, because there was enough in there, but there was that element of maybe you weren't quite in the right frame of mind for the book and that kind of thing. So there are definitely some examples that I am going to reread for that reason. So you might want to do that. You might want to reread it because you just love it so much you want everyone to read it. But some of those books, there's that idea that maybe if you have read a fair amount of science fiction, you might have already read it. So picking a book like that, you might end up just picking, you know, say you picked Frankenstein or something and everyone's like, oh, well, I've read that. Then that might kill the momentum of the group a little bit. So the other thing you can do, of course, is pick a book you want to read. So that is more risky because you might pick a book you want to read and then you don't like it. So anyway, I decided that I'd pick a book that I hadn't read because I didn't really want to reread anything that I thought the rest of the group hadn't read. So I went with a book I hadn't read. And actually that was the first one that was picked out of the hat. So the first one that was picked out was actually my choice. So I can't come up with a second book to vote for 3 months because my book has been chosen. So my book that I chose was a book I'd heard about, and I'd heard about the author, but I hadn't read anything by the author, and I hadn't read this book. And it was Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. And Cory Doctorow is quite an interesting author because he's written a fair amount of books. He's written about half a dozen novels, I think. And he has done quite a lot as an activist in trying to make the digital world more free. So he believes in free file sharing. All of his books he puts up as free downloads on his website. So he believes you should be able to just read this for free as a digital book. Believing very passionately about free file sharing tells you quite a lot about where he's coming from. And also he says something, I think it's in, where is it? Where did I see this? Yeah, there's a little biography here about him, little biographical detail stuff at the beginning, which you often get, obviously. And it says that he writes columns for Make Information Week, The Guardian Online, and Locus. He's won the Locus Award for his fiction 3 times, been nominated for the Hugo and the Nebula, which was this got nominated for the Hugo Award, Little Brother, and was named one of the internet's top 25 influencers by Forbes magazine, and a young global leader in the World Economic Forum. And then this last little comment is clearly from him. It says he hopes you'll use technology to change the world. And that is really what this is about. So he hopes you'll use technology to change the world. This is a reaction to an oppressive government, and the characters use technology to combat this oppressive government. So it was written in 2008, and I think it's quite important that it was written in 2008 because it was quite soon after 9/11. 9/11 obviously shook the world, and it wasn't just about the specifics of what happened, but it was about how extreme it was, how sudden it was, how surreal it was in many ways, but also how the government would talk about reacting to that with changing civil liberties, and how the left would react to that saying, well, you can't change our civil liberties because of what's happened. We don't want to live in a police state because of fear of terrorism. And the whole massive debate about terrorism then became a different kind of debate because of 9/11. So 9/11 was a landmark event in so many ways. It was such a huge, significant event. It was incredibly tragic, but it also had lots of political ramifications. And that is explored in this. And explored in this in a way that is really interesting because it is a YA novel. So I didn't know it was a YA novel when I voted for it, when I bought it. So when I bought it off the back. I read the back. I had heard of him, and I'd read the back. I saw it in Forbidden Planet, and I thought, oh yeah, this looks good. And it was in the main section, so they didn't have a separate YA section. I actually don't think Forbidden Planet has a separate YA section now I think about it. But I've seen this in Waterstones in the normal science fiction section, not in the YA section. So anyway, I didn't realise that it was intended for that audience. So it is a YA book, and it covers the activity, the sort of radical activities of a group of young programmers and gamers, and the way they react to the government that creates this sort of clampdown on illegal activities after a terrorist bomb goes off in San Francisco. And the main character, Marcus, is a leading activist online, and he is the focus of the story, the focus of the government activity to try and get this instigator off the map. And it's done through really good and full comprehensive character work, which is a big thing for me. So you do get to know the characters really well. You do get to know him really well because it's written in first person, so clearly you're going to get to know him really well. But you do get to know some of the other people as well, and you do want to know what's happened to some of these characters. There's one character in particular that You want to know what happened. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's done really well because it's paced in the right kind of way and the reveals are put in the right place and that kind of thing. The YA element, I think the biggest element that has that YA flavour is the romantic relationships in it. There's two. There's one that's a little bit stifled that didn't really happen, and then there's one where it's almost like the coming of age of now met someone for the first time kind of element, which is quite an important YA trope, I think, and the one that I think could turn people off or people could just ride it. So I don't mind that trope, so I just read it, just, you know, putting myself in the shoes of Gareth from 30 years ago. I don't mind doing that. And when I was all nervous about meeting my first girlfriend, all that sort of stuff. So that's all explored in that way. And I thought the way that was written reminded me of Ready Player One. The way that I can't remember his name. The character in Ernest Cline's Ready Player One talks about how much he is besotted with Artemis. I think that's a very similar tone, I think, in this. But the political end of it is not done in a similar tone. So there is much more of a discursive argument in this. There's much more debate in this, because there are scenes when he's in school and he's rebelling against the teacher that's trying to give off this terrorism should be clamped down in any way possible. It doesn't matter if your civil liberties are interfered with, and he's like putting his hand up going, whoa, hold on a minute, we shouldn't be doing that. And there's a genuine debate happening in the book in various points, as well as towards the end when the plot is coming to a finish, the debate comes up again. And you know, this debate is a very important one, because even after 9/11, which is, I think, probably the thing that inspired the book, after that you've had the Trump administration, and that administration was full of all sorts of things that sounded bordering on fascism, and there's that sort of real problem with the way that people can go from distrusting government and then voting in someone like Trump because they distrust government, and then he starts talking about all sorts of things that he thinks he should do just because he's the president. And you know, our sense of what a government should be doing to protect us and look after us, and how that is linked with our freedoms and our liberties, is so consistently important. It's always important, and it seems to be, I don't know, it seems to be more prevalent now than it was 10 years ago, because really the Trump administration has scared people a little bit. But also the British government has been shaving off certain things that we haven't even noticed in the last 15-20 years. You know, there are lots of people that don't even realise the NHS is being bought off like mad, and you know, there's lots of things that people don't talk about that we're not aware of. There's the idea that, you know, when they decided, you know, there was this big pull to get us out of the EU, and you know, there's this argument that it could be true that part of the reason why they wanted us out of the EU was they didn't like some of the things that the EU did to protect immigrants and to protect the freedom of movement, and also they didn't like the minimum wage and stuff like that. And what I'm saying is that changing of the guard in government can bring all sorts of extremes if you're not careful, and if you can't see the signs, and if you're just blind to it, because obviously there are different levels of political awareness with different voters, and you just never know. And quite often the rhetoric beats any actual analysis of policies. So unfortunately, a lot of politicians do really well with scaring the shit out of the public and making them think they need this huge amount of protection from what the politicians are making them scared of. And that is kind of within this book. This is part of the discussion in this book, and I think it's really important and really good. And if it is intended for a young audience, then that's fantastic, because it's the young people that are debating this kind of thing a lot. This helps that debate, and I think that's the most important point of this book. So Having said that, I also think the pacing is good. Like I've already said, I think the characters are good. The moments in the story that change the plot and put the characters in different places make a lot of sense. It's using Cory Doctorow's passion about gaming and online file sharing and online security and online freedoms really well. So that's the basis of the whole book, the way that they secretly meet online and the way that they galvanize and inspire the public online is a huge thread through the book as well, and obviously very modern, and the kind of thing that you can see is really doable. I mean, you know, you got the anonymous group, the ones with the V for Vendetta masks. You've got those people that really do have an impact when they put things on Twitter, and there's this sort of ripple of, oh, have you seen what they've just said? Have you seen what they're going to do? You know, that sort of thing can, you know, I don't really know how much they do or how much effect has on what they do, but there's a huge effect on their messages, and you can see how that could lead to an actual movement. And you know, these people do have an influence. So that element of the book I think is really good and really important. And I like the ending. I thought the ending was a good ending with a plot that resolved well without like a really obvious and neatly wrapped up ending for the sort of villains, if you like. There's one particular member of the home security that's a regular character in it. I mean, the villain really is the government in general and the security forces, but there is one particular person that comes up a lot, and I like the ending for that character. I thought it was very good. It was without any spoilers, it was realistically cynical, and I thought that was nice, because the tone of the book, you could imagine there might not have been any cynicism in this at all, but there is that little bit in there which I thought was good. And the sort of relationship side of it, it's got a lovely ending, as you can probably expect. And yeah, I thought it was fun. One of the things you can generally gauge your enjoyment of a book on is how much you can't wait to pick it up again. And I would say that I didn't want to DNF it. I was enjoying it, and I wanted to finish it, and it didn't take me too long, but it wasn't one that I was picking up as soon as I could, like every possible moment. So I've literally just started another book today, and I'm 50 pages in already, and it's just one sitting. So I'm really enjoying that. So I think, yeah, the enjoyment level was there, but it wasn't like, it's not going to be one of my favourite books, but it's definitely one I'd recommend. So I personally think it's well written. It's really important. I think it's intended for a YA audience, so like late teens, early 20s, I think would probably get more out of it than someone in the 50s possibly. But I don't think it's just for that audience. I don't think it's about dismissing it if you are older, because I do think the themes are really important, and I do think it's well written. So that's my judgment on that. And yeah, take with that what you think. But yeah, I'm glad I read it. I don't know how much I'm going to read his other stuff. I might get to his other stuff, because I do think it was well written, but I think the themes of the book are the most important thing. And this debate is so important about how the government protecting us has to relate and bounce off our freedoms and our civil liberties and our ability to protest and to speak our minds and to have a say and to influence the government ourselves, because the government should be working for the people. That is obviously an old adage that has to always be in people's minds. Anyway, thanks a lot. Let me know what you think of that book, or those ideas that might be coming from the book. And as always, thanks a lot for watching. Bye.
Paint me a picture